Talk is Atlas Iron and the challenges of iron mining in the Pilbara. A little bit about Atlas Iron and Ken. Atlas has an extensive portfolio of iron projects in north-east Pilbara, the Newman area and mid-west of Western Australia. These include the established Pardew and Wagina operations near Port Hedland, advanced projects at Abydos and Mount Webber, greenfields projects in the Newman area and mining leases in the mid-west. Atlas was established in 2004 and has rapidly grown its resource inventory through a series of significant exploration successes. The company's main focus is the discovery and development of direct shipping or DSO deposits in strategic locations adjacent to existing infrastructure. The Pardew operation commenced mining in October 2008 with the first export shipment loaded at FMG's Anderson Point facility only 2 months later. Low capex operations like Pardew and Wagina are the key to Atlas's expansion plans. And Abydos, how do I pronounce that? Abydos and Mount Webber will be instrumental in expanding the production base to 12 million tonnes by 2012. Getting a little bit personal now on Ken. Ken Brinsden is the Chief Operating Officer for Atlas Iron. He is a mining engineer with over 15 years' experience in surface and underground mining operations. Prior to commencing with Atlas Iron, Ken was mining manager with Iluka Resources Limited, responsible for the greenfields development of Iluka's Murray Basin mining operations in southwest Victoria. Previously, Ken held senior mine management and project development roles with Goldfields and WM Resources. I'm also proud to say that he's also a graduate of the Western Australian School of Mines. Thank you, Ken. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Col, and thank you, Colin, for your quick plug for Atlas at the beginning of the presentation. Much appreciated. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for the opportunity to talk about Atlas Iron today. It's listed as a technical presentation, but I've got to say, I'm sorry guys, I'm not a particularly technical guy, and a lot of what I talk about today is quite generic and relates more to the way that we've grown the company. And in fact, I'm also going to take the opportunity, I know I'm amongst friends here, I'm sure, to give you the sausage software reality TVs type version, and give you a little bit of the insight and a little bit of what it's taken to develop what's now a new Pilbara iron ore business. It's a little bit auspicious. I presented to the AusIMM here in Perth right at the time that I finished with Iluka Resources, and I think from memory I was talking about a new system that we'd implemented for the way that we were dealing with tails, and that was actually a little bit more technical. But it's almost 5 years to the day since I joined Atlas. That presentation was just before I joined Atlas. And what I can tell you is there's been some highs and there's been some lows with Atlas in that period of time, but mostly it's been a lot of fun. And an absolutely fantastic team to be working with, and a pleasure to talk about what we've been up to within that period of time. So there's the disclaimer. Please don't take any financial advice from me. Just take it from the recent Macquarie upgrade to $4.10 a share. And now I'll get started. So our Pilbara business has grown from a standing start in late 2008, right in the depths of the global financial crisis. We started mining in September 2008, and we started the mine without any offtake agreements. In fact, without any sale agreements. But what gave us some confidence to kick it in the guts at that point in time was that to start our first mine was going to cost $14 million. To start our second mine, we've subsequently spent $15 million. We spent about another $6 million on top of that as we continue to expand. And that really paints the most important picture or premise that I would leave with you today, and that is that the iron ore game doesn't have to be expensive to get in. And Atlas has now developed a track record where we can develop relatively low-cost mines with a corresponding relatively low-cost operating base. But of course, that requires some innovation, and I'll explain how that all unfolds. We're currently exporting at a rate of 6 million tonnes per annum. We have two existing operations, the Pardew mine and the Wodgina mine, we're pretty confident in our ability to expand the business to 12 million tonnes per annum by the end of 2012. Now, by the time you've hit 12 million tonnes per annum in the iron ore game, of course you're not as big as Rio, BHP or even FMG. But that footprint at 12 million tonnes per annum, growing to 15 million tonnes per annum shortly thereafter, is of world significance. People will look at that and say, no, that's a material chunk of production. We actually should start taking these guys a bit more seriously. We're now developing very strong cash flows. We pinch ourselves now and wonder, how is it possible that we actually ended up here? When we did the feasibility study for the Pardue mine, our first mining operation, back in 2007, we thought our long-run pricing in iron ore was between $60 and $65 a tonne. Well, I can tell you today, we're getting 165. Obviously, we didn't see that coming, but we're sure doing our best to take advantage of it. Despite the fact that we've got some relatively small iron ore mines, we are still quite competitive on the cost base, and I'll explain how all that works. A growing footprint in the Pilbara, 650 million tonnes in total resources, of which 450 million tonnes is within striking distance of the port of Port Hedland. And when we refer to striking distance, we're talking about sort of basically around 200 k's. That in itself is material. Recently, we've joined the illustrious ASX 100, and I can assure you that when I started with Atlas, I didn't imagine that happening. But anyway, it has. A picture paints 1,000 words. Here is, I think, the best slide that I can explain why Atlas has been successful. We jumped into the iron ore game thinking that we could bring a new operating model that in many respects was actually more like your classic gold mining strategy to the iron ore business. The basic premise was secure iron ore resources close enough to the port with available infrastructure such that you were not constrained to get into production. It's really literally that simple. Close to the port, close to existing infrastructure such that you don't have somebody else dictating terms for you to start your mine. That started with Pardue back in basically early 2006. We thought, yep, there's a mine there. We can get an iron ore mine running, and we'll continue to run the strategy that will secure additional iron ore resources. Now, David Flanagan, for those of you that might know him, he's our managing director. He talks now about how, having made that decision, embarking on that strategy, the company has now completed approximately 50 transactions to secure additional tenure, resources, and in some cases infrastructure to continue to grow the business. I don't think there would be too many other listed companies that would embark on a strategy that was so audacious that you would try and do 50 transactions in the space of basically 5 years, almost one a month. But that's exactly what's happened. Some have been more complex than others. Most recently, we acquired Geralia Resources, and that was one that we'd worked on for a long time. Nonetheless, came off earlier this year. By an agreed merger, we've picked up the North Pilbara resources of Geralia, and they're now an important part of our expansion strategy. New mines to come in the North Pilbara, and that essentially underwrites the first 15 million tonnes per annum of production for Atlas. We also continue to push the option of the Southeast Pilbara. Now, the Southeast Pilbara is getting more complex. By the time you get down to Newman, you're talking 380, 400 kilometres from the port. So at some point in time, from Atlas's point of view, there will have to be a game-changing event to facilitate the development of those resources. But we figure we've got a bit of time, we've got a bit of innovation, and believe it or not, there's quite a few options to realise that potential. So we'll continue to keep chipping away at that. But as I said, the basic premise, get the resources close to the port, have sufficient available infrastructure that you can underwrite the business. You'll have cheap projects that over time, of course, turned out to be extremely high cash flow assets. And the North Pilbara is really where it's all at. roughly 450 million tonnes of resources. As I said, the existing mines, additional tonnes through the recent acquisition of Duralia. We picked up the Dalton's resource, an over-the-fence resource to our existing Mount Webber project, and we also picked up McPhee Creek, which will become a big chunk of our North Pilbara DSO production. We haven't finished exploring. There's plenty more exploration to be done, both in the North Pilbara and, for that matter, the South East Pilbara. And we're pretty confident that we'll continue to turn up resources over time that will become a material chunk of our production going forward.